Clubhouse.
Welcome to Book Club Meets Movie Night, where you can join the club and see the show. This is Caroline.
And this is Mike.
So listeners, Mike and I have had a million podcasts together, it seems, but this is a new format, and we want to introduce you guys to this idea of a book club meeting movie night.
So that means for every book that we're going to cover and its related TV show or movie adaptation, we're going to take an episode or two to discuss the book club style, questions and the whole thing and talk about everything. And then the final episode of the miniseries, however many that shall be, we'll discuss either the movie or the TV adaptation for that book. We're going to deep dive into the movie itself and compare it back to the book. Which one did it better? What things did they change? Did they work? Did they not? That kind of thing. So for this first one discussing the Thursday Murder Club, it's actually going to be 2 episodes. We're going to spend this episode talking about the book, and then we're going to spend the next episode, which will be out in a couple of weeks, to talk about the movie. Actually, it'll probably be out just in like a week, I guess, actually, right?
Yeah.
It'll be out some point after that.
This is going to be a monthly release for you guys. So basically, when we choose a book, we're going to be doing that book and that show for the month. Whether we do 1 or 2 episodes on the book, and then maybe we need to do 1 or 2 episodes on the show, however it ends up working out. Basically, this is our September book, and we will be sharing our October book at the end of our episode. So for Thursday Murder Club, you can get this book in many formats. You can get it in, of course, just like a regular printed format, ebook format, which is how Mike read it, or via audiobook, which is available lots of places, including Audible. I like to augment my reading where I have it on both Audible and I actually have it in paper, because I like to hold it in my hands and read it when I can. And then when I can't and I have to be like cleaning or driving kids or doing something like that, I pop on the audiobook and listen to that. And so I can like kind of keep going and make some progress.
For the movie version of the Thursday Murder Club, it was released on Netflix on August 22nd of 2025. You can find it there. You could search by the Thursday Murder Club, or it was directed by Chris Columbus. It was a screenplay by Katie Brand and Suzanne Heathcote, and it stars a stacked cast, including Helen Mirren, Pierce Brosnan, Sir Ben Kingsley, and Celia Imrie. And they round out our 4-member murder club.
Let's talk a little bit just generally about why we're doing this podcast and why we're sort of being drawn to thrillers and mysteries.
Murder, She Wrote. Murder, She Wrote is the reason why we're doing this podcast, Caroline. There's no reason to hide it.
No, there isn't.
We love Cabot Cove. We love Angela Lansbury. We love Jessica Fletcher.
On an accident, we started watching Murder, She Wrote.
And here's the thing.
We loved it.
Originally, this was called Podcast She Wrote, and it was a genius title. And we were going to do an episode-by-episode rewatch of the 11-plus seasons of Murder, She Wrote, not to mention the many movies, for TV movies that were done. But you know what, guys? We're not the only ones who love Murder, She Wrote, as it turns out. There's like 9 active Murder, She Wrote watch-along podcasts right now. So here we are. But why thrillers and mysteries, Caroline? Because for you, I know that was an important feature of this. And just discuss, give for people like myself who have never been in book club, what's the utility of book club? What do you get out of book club? And why do mysteries and thrillers make good book club selections?
Ooh, okay. So I would say, first of all, I've been in a book club now for, 14 or 15 years. And it started off like a neighborhood kind of book club thing. And it grew because of COVID. We added members who were all over the country. And so now we actually have members who are in California. We have members who are up in Massachusetts. We have New Jersey. We're all over the place. And we do it by Zoom now, which is not ideal, I admit, because discussion is kind of difficult by Zoom because you kind of cut each other off when someone else starts speaking. And that's a little bit of a problem. But the reason why I like book club so much is because I like to analyze books. I like to sit and talk about stories, and I like to get other people's perspectives, because there's a lot of times when your life experience is so much filtering the story that you're reading that you may be getting something out of it that someone else is completely not. And they may be getting something that you're not getting. So I like sitting around talking about, like, what is everyone getting out of this? And what do you think of this character? And why did they choose to handle it this way? And all those types of things. It allows me to get to know my friends and family better who are all in book club. I don't know. It's funny. You actually end up kind of sharing, like, I don't want to say secrets, that's too much, but things that are like maybe more private about yourself that you end up sharing with your friends. And so you kind of like bond over books and bond over talking about shared experiences. The reason why I like thrillers and mysteries for book club is because as a reader, I like there to be a lot of tension and excitement and like moving forward. I want to have a page turner in front of me. And those tend to be books that have a mystery or have like a thriller aspect to them. What I've found is that when we do books where it's like sort of quieter, it might just be like a slice of life story. Those can be fun too, but they don't have as much discussion to them because you were sort of a passive person in the process. Whereas I feel like with like thrillers and mysteries, I'm like an active part of it. I'm actively trying to solve the case. My brain is moving forward when I'm not reading the book. I'm thinking about the book because I'm trying to unravel it. And I know for a lot of people, thrillers and mysteries are very satisfying because there's a problem at the beginning. And for the most part, if it's a good one, it's solved by the end. And there's something about that for most people that is extremely satisfying. But also in our very uncertain world and problems all around us all the time, it's really nice to have stuff wrapped up with a bow. And so when you choose a book like this that can be wrapped up in a bow, I know exactly how this started and how it ended, and I can walk away from it. There's closure.
I agree with that, though it's funny, and I do need that kind of closure in a book for sure, but also my favorite kind of books tend to be books in a series. I like when you meet a character or set of characters and then you continue on different journeys with them. So it's a little funny. So it's, yes, I like the closure, but also what did they do the next day? You know, I want to keep reading along with them. So I was actually very happy to know that this book series has actually spawned 3 sequels already. And actually the 4th one is literally coming out 2 weeks from when we're recording this. If you're into the Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, there's a lot here that you can dig into. You learn more about Elizabeth Joyce, Ron, and Abraham. I like mysteries and thrillers. There should be clues that even if you didn't figure it out, when you go back and look, you can see where the seeds were planted, even if you didn't catch them on your first time reading it. When you go back and be like, oh yeah, okay, now they did say that in an offhanded way. I love the offhanded thing that eventually becomes important. That's a well done one. The ones that piss me off are where like you go on the journey, you read 400 pages, you get to the last chapter, and then an alien came down, and it was the cause behind the whole thing.
I agree
with
you. I feel extremely slighted. If the pieces were not there, if you introduce a character in the final chapter, or it turns out somebody has a twin, or
yes,
something like that, right? Some move like that. No, I feel like that stuff I feel very slighted as the reader, and it does make me angry. Like looking back, if I'm like, wait a minute, they did not give you enough information to possibly draw the conclusion that this is it, which must be tricky as a writer. Like I wonder if I was a murder mystery writer, I think I'd have to work backwards and really make sure that those clues were there, you know, that someone could legitimately solve it.
Unless you have a very good kind of murder.
A very good kind of murder. What does that mean? Define a very good kind of murder.
You slip on a banana peel and it sends you an intentionally placed banana peel that sends you flying into a wood chipper.
Oh, God.
Something like that, like something elaborate. Then you start with the murder and then you kind of spin out from there. Okay. I think if it's just a general stabbing or shooting or something, I think you must work backwards. On the thing with the twin, the only time the twin at the end becomes acceptable is if in the first chapter or in like the prologue, they mentioned there was a twin who died at childbirth that was never seen again or something like that. It's like in comedy, like the best payoff to jokes are the moment right after the audience forgot about the setup, right? The best callbacks ever are the minute you forgot about it originally. Mm-hmm. That's when you hit it. That's how I feel about mysteries and thrillers, which can be hit or miss. I tend to be drawn more to spy thrillers or political thrillers. I remember in my last year of law school, I took a class called Literature and the Law, and I did that because the entire class was just reading books that tangentially in some way dealt with the law. And so I took the opportunity to read like all 10 Tom Clancy novels. I like the backstabbing, I like the turncoat, and I think this is particularly resonant for the Thursday Thursday Murder Club. I like the characters. Let's get into the actual book. What are your general thoughts about the Thursday Murder Club? Did this scratch the itch of a murder mystery for you? Do you feel like you got enough out of it in the, 400 pages or so?
It had actually a lot of murder in it, but at the same time, I was really driven by the characters. Like everything that was going on, I just wanted to know what our 4 core characters were doing more than anything else that was going on, which is kind of unusual because usually it's like the murder, and then sometimes characters aren't even really sussed out that great in a murder mystery. Sometimes it becomes so plot driven, so much about the clues, so much about you understanding whatever it's going to be, procedure. Maybe there's a courtroom, maybe there's other things, like there's all this other stuff going on that are kind of technical things that might be happening. So characters aren't always the key of a murder mystery. I know that sounds a little bit funny, but you can have a lot because of red herrings, and you have to kind of stack the deck full of characters so that you really don't know who did what. But that can mean some of the characters can be really thin. They don't have to be really very well figured out. And that can be kind of fluffy. This was a little bit different because even though there were all these murders, I don't know if it was because of the older nature of our detectives. They were so endearing to me. I was drawn into them more than I was the mystery.
I agree. I was actually pretty delighted that we weren't dealing with 1, but 2 core murders and a third murder, really. Though I agree with you. I ended up being much more taken in by what is Elizabeth's past. Why is Joyce the way she is? Why is Ron the way he is? I didn't really find myself really caring too much about Ibrahim. He's a little bit like the dry paint, but I'm sure has a very fascinating, history that will probably be delved more into in the subsequent books. And the relationships between the characters. I think the Joanna, her and Joyce, mother-daughter or daughter-mother, relationship is really interesting. I think Elizabeth and Stephen, I wish they had spent more time on that because I was
Yes.
profoundly engrossed by their relationship, and Elizabeth being this clearly ex-spy, MI6 kind of spy, being so tender and loving of and protective of her husband. I guess not surprising that she was protective. She didn't seem like the type that she's even married and that she is caring for him in this way, just waiting for him to disappear for her for good. That was a real twist for me that I didn't see coming more than even the murder. So for a relatively short-ish book, I think they actually paint them out pretty well.
They do.
Even Bogdan. I was taken in by the Bogdan character, and he was a main character, but he was definitely a fringe main character. But I was like, I want to know more about Bogdan's story.
You do.
He was such a gentle killer, as it turned out.
Okay.
He was very sweet with Stephen in the playing of the chess.
Yes.
Just his conversation with Elizabeth when she was calling herself Marina. He was very kind of kind and very, I don't want to hurt anyone, but also definitely, ended up killing Tony Curran, and just kind of was like, yeah, I did it. I mean, that conversation between Stephen having a lucid moment and Bogdan, 9 out of 10 times, Bogdan bludgeoned Stephen to death there with a chess piece or something. But the conversation just goes on.
Well, this is where their age and their circumstances, which I would love to jump into, really matters, because I think that the way that our 4 main characters are treated, and I will extend that to all the residents of Cooper Chase, the way that they're treated plays into how this story unfolds. And it has to do with their age and their stages of life and their health in a lot of ways, which is interesting. Let's talk about the author of this book, because I was not familiar with Richard Osman before we read this book, but I know he's very well known in UK.
Reading the special thanks and the credits that came after the book, that's where I was first kind of put on to who he was, because he talks about the process of him becoming an author and the history of and the evolution of the book, to learn that he's known as kind of a quiz show master and a person who also did comedy in his previous life, but really a TV guy, a BBC One, and to learn that, you know, he was this well-known personality. I mean, he did over 1,300 episodes of the Pointless TV show across 30 series, or what we would call seasons in America. He's a very well-known person and only left Pointless because the Thursday Murder Club book took off and he realized he could make and would rather be making a living as an author. It was kind of wild to think about what his journey in trying to sell this book in the UK. Do you think there was a help or a hindrance being a quiz show comedy guy trying to sell this septuagenarian murder mystery series?
When I was starting to learn about this, I was kind of curious about how the UK was responding more. So I did a little digging on that because of how much they had already known this individual as this game show host, right? So when I was listening and like watching and reading about how it was being accepted when he wrote this, it was making me think very much of like when Bill O'Reilly here in the States wrote books that was like Finding Jesus, Finding Lincoln, all this stuff. And people were sort of like being like, I don't know. He's like a TV personality. I don't know. I don't know if this is like, is he a real author or whatever? And I know a lot of people read those books. So that sort of like showed like you can have this crossover where you can have complete interest in something else as well. For him, I think he had to get a little bit over the hump because these were kind of like comedy, fun, like easygoing kind of shows that he was hosting essentially. You know, they weren't like serious shows or anything like that. So trying to become an author, I could see where it would be like a little bit difficult for your audience to accept you in a different way.
At the same time, though, and I didn't vet this is a Wikipedia page fact, that when the book came out, it sold almost 700,000 copies in the UK in its first 4 months. But even more staggeringly, it ended up being it beat Barack Obama's memoir as the best-selling book of the Christmas season in 2020. Of course, that's according to Penguin, Viking Press publisher. Yes, there's definitely an adjustment period, but I think him being a known personality seems like it definitely helped, though, in the end, his book sales. I don't know that a debut author
gets those kind of numbers.
I think the sensibility of someone who wrote comedy comes through in this book.
I think so too.
There's a lot of cheekiness in here. There's also a lot of Britishness in here. There's also a lot of British wit. I'm curious how this book, and I didn't look it up because I didn't want to be tainted kind of on reviews, how Americans tend to take in this book, because I know for myself, I watched British humor, the wit I got, but there were so many references in here to things like, there's like a British high-end, would be like our food emporium that they mentioned several times in here. Like I had to go look it up because they kept talking about how they have like a cafe inside and stuff. There were the whole bunch of British, very specific British references that I had to like go look up kind of thing, which I'm fine to do. And I felt like I was smarter for it. but, you know, I imagine a lot of people who were just picking this up in an airport or something in America, you know, if the Britishness of it, which still seems to stymie Americans for some reason. Curious if that's going to be a bar for when we get to talking about the movie. That would be a shame because I think there's a lot here to enjoy. I think, what is Netflix calling it? Kind of a cozy mystery.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are using like cozy and cottage and stuff like that. A lot of that kind of talk. Let's dive into like our characters and our setting and all that good stuff.
Our book club questions.
Yeah. So I'm a teacher by nature, and not only by profession, but also just naturally. I always like to talk about who are like our main characters and what's the main problem and where is our setting and all that good stuff. So our setting is this retirement community of Cooper's Chase, which sounds beautiful and like a wonderful place to retire to. This concept of having 4 retirees, and they call them pensioners, as our main characters, already you've got a completely different slice of the pie than we normally get. Although they're getting a lot of attention right now, I think. On Netflix, we have a Man on the Inside, Grace and Frankie, and I'm seeing a lot more showing this age range of people. And I think that that is wonderful. My grandmother's 99. I have like a complete everyday dip into the life of a retirement home because my grandma lives in one. She is always regaling us with stories and happenings, all of these things, including things like whenever Ibrahim would like say something about the schedule or something like intermediate knitting or something like that. Like that cracked me up because that's exactly what my grandma's like. I enjoyed the age of these characters and the setting right off the bat. What did you think about the choice of having this age group as our main characters?
I don't think the story holds your attention nearly as much if they're younger people, if it's just an apartment complex. 6. 4 friends, living in the village in an apartment, like Murders in the Building, a show I can't get into. And I love Steve Martin and Martin Short, and I have not been able to get into Murders in the Building. But yes, they're older, but they're not as old as I think these pensioners. And something about the Cooper's Chase and the kind of retirement homeness of it, I think it's a genius thing that they talk about and give at least a sentence to so many of the different residences, because I think it does bring you into the world, kind of like how Donna, DC, DeFreitas, and Hudson, the DI. I think the same way they're kind of brought into the organized chaos of Cooper's Chase. That's kind of how I felt. I felt like I was really alone with the ride for them. Their advanced age give them the grace to be we have to be this way because we don't know if tomorrow's coming.
There's decisions that they can make too that can be very final. There's decisions that they can make that are with life's wisdom that I think that a lot of other people maybe at different phases of life can't understand. But at this phase of life where they are, the decisions they're making make sense to things that are happening, and people around them are making decisions that, and when I say make sense, doesn't mean they're not sad decisions, doesn't mean that they're not horrible situations that people got themselves into and then had to make rough choices. There's a lot going on there, but their age and their stage of life creates this whole, I almost want to say Cooper's Chase could have been a character unto itself. It could have been. I don't feel like it was, but it could have been. But their age and their stage of life feels like a character unto itself.
I agree. I mean, think about this. If you make them 20 years younger, right? Let's put them in their early 50s instead of their 70s or even 80s. I think this book feels completely different. You'd find Elizabeth very off-putting, and I'm sure there are people that find her off-putting to begin with. Joyce would be too Rose Nyland and instead of sleep under the radar.
She had like
it.
Yeah, and she had like a little funny like edge to her where you kind of were like a little suspicious of her, even though it was like on the surface is like, no, she's like this nice, sweet old lady who's like baking cakes, like, why are you worried about her? But she had this little edge to her. So let's talk about our main 4 friends here. Who we have? We have
Joyce, we have Elizabeth, we have Ibrahim, and we have Ron.
So Joyce is our newest member to the Thursday Murder Club, and
she's a probationary member, right? I mean, she's yes. She's filling the void left by Penny, who we learn is in the hospice ward. She was the original 4th member and seemingly best friends with Elizabeth. She herself was a former constable, the same role that Donna DeFreitas has in the show. That was Penny's role once upon a time, back when women certainly were not normally in the police force. So now having her being in hospice and slipping away, it seems that the 3 members of the murder club are looking for a 4th, and Joyce, being a retired nurse, seems the perfect person to fill that role. Everyone has a very distinct personality, right? They have the thing that defines their personality. Elizabeth is the leader of the gang. She is the go-getter. She's the ball buster. She gets things done. Ibrahim, who is a retired psychiatrist, though still practicing, it seems, to some extent.
I bet you never stop practicing if you're in that role.
Probably not. I mean, him and it's a very ubiquitous, notebook. Imagine he's always taking things down and recording notes and thoughts about people, and probably has a very well-developed opinion about everyone at Cooper's Chase. You have Ron Ritchie. You have Red Ron, a former union advocate, taking it to the police for his whole career, who is faltering, right? I mean, him and his son Jason. But Ron is interesting because on his good days, he's still Red Ron, but on his bad days, you can see where he's starting to slip a little bit too. And I think the book does a good job of peppering that in without making it too much of the focus.
I agree.
Ron is only sharp some of the days of the week and some of the parts of the day, right?
Yeah.
And then we have Joyce, who is the only one other than, we have Ron and Jason, who is an active participant in the story. The only other one who has another loved one that we really learn about actively throughout the novel, who has this relationship with her daughter. Do you think the book does a good job of rolling out their relationship? Do you know this relationship? I guess that's what I'm trying to ask.
Joyce seems like somebody who, I don't know, she's familiar in a lot of ways. Because I feel like she's got this like little old lady side to her, but she's got this nurse side, which is very practical, and this other side to her that feels like there's more to her.
Oh, she's horny. She has a real horniness, and I think it's kind of her baking thing too.
Okay.
She was looking to get with people and or ship people. She seemed very preoccupied in a way that I enjoy.
Common. That's so common in these retirement homes. Like, that's the thing. Like, it's very common.
Yeah.
My grandmother, again, 99, she just had like a 68-year-old boyfriend. Yeah, he moved out, but it was a whole friggin' thing.
My 17-year-old son is obsessed with the statistic that the highest rate of STDs are among the elderly population. It's like the one thing he held on to from like health classes. But she has this very sweet kind of grandma vibe about her.
She does.
Though she
there's something
doesn't
else.
seem to be a grandma. But then there's kind of like, I want to be with Bernard, and maybe I'll give Ron a call on the off days. And, like she seems like a widower herself, right? Her dear beloved Jerry. But is there a main character here? I guess
I think it's Elizabeth.
My next question.
To me, it's Elizabeth.
I think it's Elizabeth too, but I think there's an argument because we get the diary entries, and the story is really, if the story is told from her first person point of view, we're getting Joyce's first person point of view.
Right. But I want to talk a little bit about why, and we 100% would love to hear your comments back to us. So please comment back. As our book club goes, there's no right or wrong answers here. So this is all just our interpretations. Because again, we all have our own life experiences that we're bringing to the table. We're not all starting off with the same ingredients. So we're not all going to have the same results here. I want to open that up right away because I don't want to get a bunch of emails or messages saying like, you got it wrong. Because no, it's through your point of view at your phase of life and what you're reading. All opinions are welcome in this. So one of our first questions says, why do you think the author chose to use her perspective in such a way using this first person POV of Joyce's diary? I enjoyed the use of that for a couple of reasons. For one thing, I think that it really helped make the book feel like it was almost like we were in on it because we were like reading her inner thoughts, and there was something about that that made you feel like you're part of the club in your own way. Joyce is kind of our avatar because she's the newest member to the Thursday Murder Club. We are brand new to the Thursday Murder Club, so we like automatically kind of hook up with Joyce in a lot of ways, which to your point, apparently she would enjoy.
And actively encourage, enjoy, and act. She wants everyone hooking up, not just herself.
Every time when we had a passage from her, I felt like I got to know her better, but also it felt like we were like given little bits of information in a way that could be sort of parsed out in a way that's different than if we were like watching it happen in real time, because we're getting information as Joyce is kind of realizing that information, which is not necessarily at the same pace that Elizabeth, Ibrahim, or Ron, or really even the story is going. She can be getting little nuggets and like figuring little things out or giving us little bits of information that like later on it's like, oh, okay, like that's when she figured it out. But like, Elizabeth maybe already did or whatever.
She also had such an infectious joy about what they were doing. Obviously, Elizabeth is into solving the cold case murders, and it definitely gets her blood pumping from her former life to be doing this. But there was like a childlike enthusiasm and joy from Joyce throughout the novel, like when they do the whole nun bit to get Donna to talk to them, and then Elizabeth and Donna are having this very serious standoff kind of thing, and it's Joyce who leans forward and talks into the microphone and says she's trying to hide a smile for the record,
yes.
Like there's a very playful, or her diary entries where she'd be like, Elizabeth said to be ready tomorrow at 9. I don't know where she was taking us, but I know it's going to be exciting. Like there's like so then you're excited because you don't know what's going to happen either, but we're going into Fairhaven, or we're going to find Bobby Tanner. We're going to do something exciting because she's excited.
And that's where I mean, where like she can give us the information, like Elizabeth's taking us somewhere tomorrow at 9:00, right? Like she can tell us that. Now Elizabeth knows where we're going, right? But so the way of showing it through the diary, it's like we're only getting the information as Joyce is getting it. It like sets the pacing in a way for us.
I dare say the diary entries are a key component to what makes this book work for me. I think delivering so much, for one thing, it also allows you to move the story along, because if we're in some scene at any point, it may just cut off and then you get a diary entry to start the next chapter that just fills in the blanks of what happened. With Joyce's commentary, now you're also getting, though, a biased account of it, right? Because when we're getting information, and we get plenty of important information delivered in the story via the diary entries, because of that, it's not an omnipotent person delivering that information. So it's interesting because then you also have to weigh, is that information accurate? Because you're getting an opinion of one of the characters as they're dealing and taking in the information or anticipating an activity in real time. The author can deliver information and you can rely on it because it's being given by the author, where you should be able to rely on it. Here, it's a character telling you what happened or their impression of what happened in something. You believe it because it's what you're reading, but also if you stop and think about it, be like, should I believe it? There was a large part of this novel where I thought Joyce was guilty of at least one of the murders.
I think a lot of people feel that way about Joyce. Like, she has this little extra something sus about her.
It's that devilish playfulness, I think, that kind of comes through her. She's like someone who would be like wrist deep in blood and be like, this is amazing, I'm having the best time, and I think that kind of comes through. So then when you're reading her diary entries, there was a part of me sometimes that was like, this may be like a murderer's accounting of things, because there's so much unbridled joy and enthusiasm coming through the writings. You'd be like, she may be a psychopath, because then you're like, I want to believe Joyce, but at the same time, she also very easily maybe could have done this.
Yes, I agree with that. So let's go on to our second question, because I think that you're starting to get into some of that stuff. Just a reminder, Joyce was a nurse. Elizabeth, they kind of like tried to be a little playful about how long they were going to tell us about Elizabeth.
She places herself that in a Cold War time frame almost certainly makes it that she had to be involved with the intelligence services of England. Though, if I remember correctly, the book,
right?
MI5 is like the FBI. They do domestic things. So she would have been MI6. That's like the CIA equivalent for the United States.
Okay.
So she was definitely, most certainly an MI6 agent. Now, I don't think they actually ever explicitly say it in the novel because I kept waiting for it, but I've read a lot of spy novels. So I felt very comfortable in all of it, and I picked up on it like right away. I think everyone did.
She acted like it, like the whole time.
The whole time, but just when she knows Polish, because she would have been in Krakow or Warsaw during that, just the time and place and her age, was very well done for kind of like placing it, for that kind of time frame. Though I think the book was having fun by never actually confirming it, because what spy would ever actually confirm that they had been a spy?
Right, agreed.
So
then Ibrahim was a psychiatrist and Ron was the trade union leader. So the question is, who do you think was the most helpful in solving the crime? What strengths did they each bring to the table, and what were their weaknesses? So Elizabeth, I think, is the easiest one to talk about from the start, because, I think she was the most helpful in solving the crime.
Yes.
I think she had all the tricks up her sleeve, and her weaknesses were very little. I don't think she had many weaknesses at all, if any, when it came to solving the crime. I don't know. Ibrahim and Ron, I don't think that they were as strong of characters. Now, I know we have the whole series here to delve more into them, but when I have to think about what their individual strengths are, obviously Ibrahim was very analytical, observant. He was paying attention to everything that was going on. He was collecting, all the info. He was good at that part about noticing things. Ron, what would you say was his big strength? He's charming, he's charismatic, he's got stuff like that.
He's a very specific tool for a very specific situation, right? When you need to gather a bunch of old people in front of the gate to the cemetery, right before Ian gets murdered, you call in Ron for that, right?
Yes.
That's what makes Ron's blood run, and it's the thing he's good at, right? If you need him to be a good old boy, you need him to talk, the way of the common man, you call in Ron. Otherwise, obviously he's intelligent. I don't know how Sherlock Holmesian he is. I think the book understands the weakness of Ron and Ibrahim's character. I think that's why they get paired up to do so many things together.
Yes,
I think Elizabeth does a lot on her own. Elizabeth does a lot with Joyce. Ron and Ibrahim basically do everything together, unless it's Ron with
one
his
person
son.
Together.
They are. Weird way. They're like Kerman's head a little bit, right? There's like the
yin and yang.
Yeah, the OCD part of the brain, that's Ibrahim, and like the punch first, ask questions later kind of part of the brain, that's Ron. You put them together, and I think Ibrahim keeps Ron in check, and I think Ron cuts through some of the bull, to get things done in a way that maybe Ibrahim would have been too skinny skittish to do, or would have wanted to take a more cerebral path through.
Okay, so then we get into some of our side characters. Let's start talking about, this is sort of like our, they're not exactly side, but I'm going to say like tier B characters. So do you think that PC, Donna DeFreitas, and DCI, Chris Hudson, make a good team? Do you think Donna was smart to stay in touch with Joyce, even though it was unprofessional at times? Why or why not? What do you make of the relationship between the detectives and the septuagenarians? I'll answer the part about the do I think Donna was smart to stay in touch with Joyce. If you are a detective, it is always smart to leave yourself open to any amount of information that could come in to help solve a situation. I understand that they're classifying as unprofessional, but I kind of feel like it's like when police officers like go out into the community and like get to know people and do whatever. Like some of that is like you have to have less formal times, like very casual times when you're like talking with people or getting around with people so that they will talk to you and they will tell you information when they need to. So I think for Donna, like it just makes sense to be open to any information that could come your way because anything could help solve the case. So that's my why or why not. Like why? Because why would you shut down any avenue of getting any information? That would be a bad idea.
Especially after this group demonstrates quickly and often how good they are at getting things done or getting access to information. You just be standing either on your ego being bruised, or you would just be standing on technicalities to refuse their help. Yes, there's chain of evidence considerations. I don't know how UK law works, but let's assume it's close enough to how American law and order works. Yes, you can't be taking leads on buried bones and acting like things haven't been disturbed and evidence tainted and contamination. There's plenty of things that push came to shove, I would imagine have to be inadmissible, like the bank records and the company records for Bentham's company, just the whole Bogdan and the Bones thing. I mean, you can dress that up and put the lipstick on the pig as much as you want. I still don't think that gets you around in a real world situation. But for purposes of this story, especially Donna trying to make a name for herself in this place that she regrets coming, right? Because that's a whole aspect that we don't need to talk about, but her motivation for leaving the Met Police in London and moving out to Fairhaven was because of a bad breakup. Everyone's going to regret that decision almost immediately, as she does. So now she's just trying to make the best of a bad situation because now she can't walk away from it again. So she's stuck here at least for a little while. And if she's going to be stuck here, she doesn't want to be doing parking tickets. She doesn't want to be going to old folks' home to talk about, why are they sending her to this swank retirement home to talk about ID cards and locks on the windows? No resident is getting the gas man. And it's also 2025. Does the gas man come to your door anymore? I don't know. I don't know. They don't come to my door anymore.
Weird. Yeah.
There's someone at the door. They're not sending Ron to talk to the gas man when he comes and check his ID card.
Right. No. I mean, Cooper's Chase sounded beautiful.
Yes.
I don't
brought this up before and I wanted to segue into it only because I'm 47 and I was recently looking for apartments. There have been an explosion of senior residence homes and developments that have sprung up here in the Northeast where you have to either be 55 or 65. Caroline, some of these places are beautiful.
Yeah.
And I found myself often thinking, being like, I wonder if I could make a deal with them that I'll stay for X number of years. Like, I'm 47 now. Like,
you pay some extra surcharge.
Yeah, you'd be like, I'm going to be 55 soon enough. Why don't you let me in, or at least like reserve my spot? Because man, who wouldn't want to live in some of these places? Now, I haven't come across a place as beautiful as Cooper's Chase. Then I think I would also want to be a little bit more urban than they are.
But it's a beautiful place to retire and just be able to relax and enjoy.
I'm not quite old enough that I think I'd want to live in a former convent where nuns lived and died on a regular basis, and our jigsaw room was like an infirmary maybe. I don't know that I'm so old that I'm cool with that, but the idea of Cooper's Chase though really worked for me, and I was like, man.
And it does make sense, actually, that they would be revitalizing like an abbey into a retirement home. Like this is what is going on in all over the world right now, is trying to transform. I mean, people are transforming malls into apartments. They're transforming schools, libraries, churches, banks. I've seen all kinds of stuff turned into housing. There's all kinds of things that are happening like that makes it very realistic. Before we leave this police conversation, I did want to ask real quick, did you think the relationship between the detectives and our retirees, did you feel like we had to suspend like a lot of reality with that?
Yes. Yes.
Could you feel I was leading you to like,
yeah, I think DCI Hudson's response to them, at least his initial response to them of, I'm not going to take orders from old people, I think it gets abandoned almost immediately. Once they have that meeting where they like press in on him with and then they give him the tea and the cake, because Joyce is always handing out cake, and then he can't really balance it and he's uncomfortable and they made it warm in the room. After that point, he doesn't really ever push back again. Yeah, I think you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. I mean, they really solve everything. They really solve like 90% of everything.
And they wouldn't have had 90% of the information without Elizabeth doing the things that she did. I mean,
right. They're never finding Bobby Tanner. They're never finding the florist or anything, or unraveling that. They're never finding out the Bogdan part of the story, which again is not related to the May murders, though it actually is related to the May murders. But none of that comes out if not for Elizabeth being the curious, sweet old lady that she is, kind of thing, or maybe not so sweet. I don't know. But I was actually more interested in the relationship between Donna and Hudson.
Really?
Yeah, just because this idea of she's basically blackmailed into being put on the team, or DCI Hudson is basically blackmailed to put her on the team. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't that normally come with some kind of resentment there? I think
usually,
it would. Yeah. Especially given, I think they're meant to be a distant amount of age apart. I think that's why they don't pursue them as a couple, and they eventually said that the end of the book is that Donna is going to try and set up DCI Hudson with her mother, who checks the boxes for the ideal woman that he would like. So I don't think they were ever really setting up at any point a ship between these two, though there is a lot of Donna actively trying to reform DCI Hudson's slovenly ways. And so you could read into that. She's looking for a man. He's a mess.
Okay.
You know,
I was thinking that more like daughter, dad kind of.
For me, I had to remind myself of that, so that when the mother aspect came up at the very end of the story, out of nowhere, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
In a realistic setting, there would have been a lot more resentment that he was forced to take this police constable who's been on the force for no time at all and having to bring her into the case. Now, she clearly is smart and she's good at her job and she is into the old people. So he is wise to make her an asset in the investigation. But I think in a real world setting, you and I have dealt with men in powerful positions all of our lives. I feel like more times than not, they would treat this with resentment more than, hey, welcome to the team. I'm going to make you a valuable asset out of the gate.
1,000%. Yes. You know what we need to talk about real quick here? We need to talk about what is the actual conflict that's going on in this story. What is the actual situation that's happening at Cooper Chase with Ian and Tony and all this good stuff? Lay it out for us, Mike.
I think for the conflict that kind of puts everything into motion, it's the greed of Ian Bentham, right? He already has Cooper's Chase. He has this 3-part phase plan that he has in his mind. Phase 2 is digging up and moving all of the cemetery plots, though he doesn't seem to be very concerned with actually moving the plots. And he's going to build more luxury, flats there. And then he's also buying the farm at the top of the hill, trying to go through the daughter to buy more, plots at the top of the hill. And that will be his phase 3. Now, he has this deal with Tony Curran where he has to give him a quarter of the ownership profits, and he no longer wants to share the money. He's going through a divorce, an expensive divorce, it seems, and he just, like greedy men always do, they always want more. And I think that's the conflict that sets literally everything in motion, because the digging up of the cemetery plots triggers 2 of our subplots between Penny and John and her husband, as well as Father Mackey, who we haven't even mentioned until this point. He's a whole subplot of the story. They're very much about the cemetery, but then you have the motivation of killing Tony Curran because that will make Ian Bentham very rich. Tony Curran shares revert back to Ian upon Tony's death. He stands, I think they say 12 million in the book is the number they come up with that he stands to make, or 12 million pounds if Tony's dead. I think everyone wants Ian Bentham dead. I don't know anyone that actually actively wants him alive, except for maybe Bogdan, who stands to make a lot of money as the new head builder. I laid out a lot of plots just there, and there's a lot of people who did it. This gets to the end of the book, Did any of the murders as they actually took place or any of the things for why things happened actually make sense? Let's take Tony. Let's take the fact that Bogdan killed Tony.
Yes.
Does the reasoning that it was basically revenge for Tony having killed one of his close friends years ago and he had been laying in wait? Does that work for you, given it's been 20-something years or almost 20 years since the original? I mean, that's very patient for revenge.
That is very patient for revenge, but, I mean, it is a solid reason. I mean, revenge is always a good reason in these books, but I agree with you that the time frame and how long it's been and everything, and the fact that he's, like, been there for so long, that if it does feel like there was no time to do this before this point, or, you know?
Right.
You actually had the patience to wait this long?
Which I guess then that's what makes it a red herring of killing him now, because Ian would stand to make so much money from it. Bogdan kind of shoots himself in the foot, though, because he kills Tony, but by doing so makes the guy he's going to make money off of to support his mother and help her while she's sick, makes him the prime suspect of that murder. So that's a little short-sighted. And then Ian, you could have given me 100 guesses. I don't think I'm coming up with John in the hospice ward as Ian's murderer.
And that was so tricky, though. You know, could we have figured that out? I mean,
no.
No,
that he's keeping syringes in his room loaded to bear with drugs as like a go bag. Like you and I talk about having a go bag all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and John's keeping murder go syringes. I needed more than just them mentioning at the beginning he was a vet.
Yes.
Perfect. And I like that seed.
Thank God there was that seed. If there wasn't that seed, I'd be screeching.
But he's not actively, as far as we know, John doesn't leave the chair. When does he even have time? How long have those syringes been there that he's ready to he's going to end it himself? He kills himself overnight and he sticks Penny in their goodbyes, and which Elizabeth understands is going to happen. Like, there was no setup for any of that. I was very confused. I understood what they were talking about, but how it all came together, I was just like, I'm missing information here that I wish I had earlier on, that I could have called back and be like, oh yeah, they said John was never without his medical bag. Even if, you know, John retired 20 years, never without his medical bag in case the llamas needed, you know, medicine or something.
Right.
Like something to be like, he still has medical stuff with him.
Mm-hmm. That would have been a good idea. Yeah, I'd have liked that.
It would have been a throwaway line when we first meet him, and you would have forgotten about it, but then you would have called it back and been like, oh, they told us John keeps his medical bag always handy.
Very true. Very, very true.
Because they're dealing with Joyce being a nurse and being on the premises 70 years ago, because they really want to make a connection between who killed the guy, the mysterious bones in the plot, to the murders going on here. There's no reason that they're actually connected, but because of their proximity to happening, I think that is human nature. That makes sense to me that you would want to make them connected. So they begin to harp on who was here 50 years ago, or you know, and that's they're looking for that connecting theory. Who's here now versus who's 50 years ago? There's no reason that the person 50 years ago would still be around today. It just happens to be the person who killed Mercer 50 years ago is still here today. There's no reason is, but the book is treating it like it must be true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I had a question earlier on that we never asked, but because I knew it would come out and just talking about it. Were there too many subplots in this book?
Yes, there was too many subplots. Yes, but here's the thing. That is part of the nature of a murder mystery. And it's something that you and I will have to compare and contrast as we're like going along and reading different books. For a murder mystery, you do have to have a lot more characters that are throwaway. Like I discussed this at the beginning of this conversation. You have to have some people who we have to be suspicious of, but, you know, doesn't play out into anything. And that's weird to do when you think about, because there's very few other types of stories where you create characters to throw them away. That's not the point of doing that. But in a murder mystery, in any type of thriller, you do have to have characters that you're willing to say, yeah, no, see, they didn't have anything to do with this at all. And that's like, why in the hell did you talk to us about them then? You know? But that's what murder mysteries are.
Right. I think Father Mackey's story actually
yes.
is really interesting. One, because I think they did a good job of like, oh, this guy's clearly not a priest from early on, or at least a priest who is having doubts about his feelings about God, right? I think they set that up. There's a couple of lines early on to be like, oh, there's something very suspicious about this guy. And then there is such a good red herring built in of course, he's been here forever. He's been a priest forever. Of course, he would care about these nuns' final resting place because at his advanced age or whatever, like this is all that he has left. Yes, he does care about one set of bones in particular. And then his whole side story, I love that. That was a subplot that really worked for me because he does look so good for the murder. But then his real motivation is nothing to do with the murder at all. I think you need the amount of subplots to make the core mystery better because it makes you spend time away from the main players for lengths of time so you can forget the things that are going on. Does that make sense?
It does. Like, you've got to have a deft hand about how much you use these extra characters and how much you pull back on them, because you can go too much into some side character and people do get like pissy. Like, you made me just spend how much time on this character who turned out to be nothing. And again, that doesn't happen in other types of stories. You know, when you have a hero's journey, everybody along the way, you don't say, oh, that person was a complete throwaway. No, everybody has a lesson. Everybody's supposed to learn something from or is supposed to help them along. This type of story, this genre, creates this need for these throwaway characters that can be so galling. Or, like you said, you were really thrown in with Father Mackey. And so then it was like, well, wait a minute. Why didn't we do even more on Father Mackey, you know?
Caroline, we went to Cyprus in this book. I had to learn about the difference between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots.
Wow.
Like, this book took us, we were in a jail in Greece for part of this book.
Yeah,
it was far-reaching. There was a guy named Turkish Johnny in this book. Wild. What are we doing? I mean, we literally, even from England, like, we went on a journey to find dead end after dead ends. And I'm totally great with all of that. This is the twin from planet Xenon, you know, at the last minute that I was talking about that I don't like. We went down a lot of plausible rabbit holes and we exhausted them. That wasn't it. Turned out that guy had nothing to do with it, or this guy had nothing to do with it. For it to be John who murdered Ventham.
Okay, let's jump into this. This is technically question 6, but let's just ask. One of the recurring themes is a gray area between the law and each character's moral code. Do you think that Penny's husband, John, did the right thing? How about Penny? So everybody remembering that this is the part that Mike was talking about just a couple minutes ago, where he was saying about, you know, John is Penny's husband, just remembering everything. Penny kills Peter Mercer because he is this abusive boyfriend and she's tired of these abusers getting off on getting away with murder, literally. And he had killed his girlfriend. She just knew it. So she kills Peter Mercer, right? Now, do you think the way that they handled this whole thing was, I don't know, right is such a weird word. Is it relatable? Because I don't know if I can use the word right. That just feels weird.
Before I realized Daredevil was a comic, I had this great pitch for a TV show of a vigilante lawyer where he would be a prosecutor constantly being disgruntled by the system, letting bad guys get away that he knew were guilty, but because of technicalities, they were getting off. And so that he would then avenge the law and justice at nighttime. So he would be a prosecutor during the day, win some, lose a lot, but then with the righteous hand of God would strike down those offenders who got off on technicalities in like a vigilante crime role. I was very into this. Turns out that's what Daredevil is. So it took it off the board for me. You never know. But I was very into this idea for a long time. So I have no problem with what Penny did. I sleep perfectly fine at night with what Penny did. I get why John did what he did too. I don't know. If I'm John, I think I maybe stick it out a bit and see how it all shakes out before I take my life and Penny's life at the end. I mean, he was just pretty sure he was going to jail forever, and so Penny was going to be there. And so in that scenario, I get it, but also like, the line was so gray on who was getting away from murder and things, and this was so long ago. Yes, there's no statute of limitations on murder, but still, I feel like we had to suspend so much disbelief in this story so that for John to feel like he needed to take his life and Penny's life at the end.
Yeah. See, part of it that I'm getting about that portion is kind of a whole other side to this that isn't just about the murder side, but it is about the fact that this woman was at end of life. You could see what the scenario was and that he had been sitting there and, you know, keeping vigil and doing everything he was doing. There's some part of me that understands just wanting to take control of the situation at some point and wanting, it's only a one-way street. And Penny's already in the state she's in. And we can only guess from the Bernard storyline that we have been told very, very much how impossible it is to try to live without your partner, right? Like that is something that grief and that loss.
I definitely want to get into Bernard's story.
Yeah, we definitely will. But can you see that from John's standpoint? Now, Bernard is past the point of the spouse dying, right? So do you see why John, having Bernard as this other story, you can see where it's like, I don't want to live past my wife, you know, because I don't want to be like Bernard, right? So there's like this moment where you're like, well, it was the second she dies, I need to die too. We're not in that phase of life. So I don't know how I would feel when I'm there. I feel like this was speaking to something so much bigger, you know, it was speaking to like, what would you do for your spouse? And like, how far would you go to cover for your spouse, and how that sort of like wanting to take control at the end of your life too, of like, you know, you can't control, and when people are losing their memories and things are happening, and then everything that's happening with Penny, and she has dementia, and even watching Stephen, I would think for John would be scary, you know, or even Ron. And so I feel like there's all this evidence for you to be like, you don't want to be here past Penny. Their story was fascinating to me because you're right. He could have sat back and sort of let it play out a little bit more. But I also feel like there's such a need for control and such a lack of control, you know, when you're at that age and stage.
There's a little bit of this conversation we're talking about, like assisted suicide or, you know, just end of life choices and who gets to decide end of life choices. And I understand putting Penny out of her misery, because if she could hear or couldn't hear, this was a conversation. This was a recurring conversation between Elizabeth and John throughout the book, that maybe if it's going to come out, you don't want her literally to have to suffer the indignity of it, whatever they may do to her, which I can't imagine. They're not going to like put handcuffs on her in the hospice ward or whatever. And there's a certain romance here too. I don't want to live a minute beyond her.
And I'll cover for her. That's incredibly romantic.
Right. He, in the end, confessed to not doing it. I mean, he killed Ian Bentham to cover for her, but he could have just taken the blame for himself too. Did Ian Bentham have to die in the end? If this was on the table, did John think he wouldn't get away with it? Because if you think you're going to get away with it, then I can see why you do this, because the secret will remain a secret. But now you have added another murder on top of the murder from who no one gives a shit ago. Now you have an actual murder, and you are still in the prime of your life, because John seemed very fit and very with it.
Prime of his life is probably way too strong.
Well, okay, not prime, but he still seemed with it. He was out on the ground. He was on the ground enough to be in the scuffle with Ian Bentham where he could stick him with a syringe where no one noticed. Yeah. Like that requires a certain level of dexterity, no matter how long you were a vet and retired, that no one saw it in the scrum. Like, there's also the question of, there are plenty of people who were married for many years, and then one of them dies. I don't think the person who dies wants their loved one to follow them right after, for the most part. I mean, I'm sure those relationships are out there. Yes, I think lovebird syndrome is a thing. I have seen it several times in my life where a partner passes away and then the other person passes away within, a short amount of time. But I think for the most part, isn't going on living thing one that you would think your partner would, like Penny would want John to keep living, wouldn't you think? And also to keep her memory alive. Like, now we're down to Elizabeth. Now we're down to Elizabeth keeping Penny's memory alive and John's.
Maybe. But okay, let's go back to the fact that they are not our main four. right? Penny kind of is, but isn't.
In the prequel book, she will be. The inevitable prequel story of
so
this.
She, she's not one of our main four. John's definitely not one of our main four.
And yet did the key murder.
I think that for them, what I'm going to say is we can just take the characters for what they are. So we can say what we think we would do or what we think we would feel personally, but I don't agree with the idea of sort of like, wouldn't your partner want you to, I don't know. And I don't know John and Penny well enough. Like maybe they made an agreement a long time ago that like, if I go, you go right after me, or I'm going right after you if you die or whatever. I don't know. I have no idea. But for me, it just speaks to their love and it's just a snapshot of them. You don't have to agree with what they did. You don't have to say I would do it too, or I feel the same way about my spouse or anything like that. It doesn't have to apply to either one of us, but at the same time, but I get it. I get the feeling because I see this, again, my grandmother is in a retirement home. I see the lack of control of their day. Like there's the need to have that schedule and to keep that schedule is so important because there's such a need to want to control what the hell is happening to them. And I get it so much. And we're going to kind of get into that into our next question. When we're talking, I'm gonna bring up Joyce here when she says, Joyce says, I'm very happy to be overlooked and always have been. And I do perhaps think it will be helpful in this investigation. Do you agree? What insights or advantages does she gain by not calling attention to herself and staying under the radar? Some of these things that I think that Joyce shows, and we're going to talk about this in a more positive light, is it's the same exact things that are going on with Penny and John. The lack of control, the fact that you're invisible, the fact that, people aren't thinking about you anymore. That can be used to your advantage, or it can motivate you to do other things like John and Penny did. Let's talk about Joyce though for a minute, because this is a little bit of a happier aspect of looking at it. What do you think about this idea that she kind of moves around feeling like she's not being seen?
I think it's a superpower. I think it's a great aspect to her character because you have Elizabeth and you have Ron, two loud characters or forceful personalities, right? When people talk about the Thursday Murder Club or the people that use the Jigsaw Room on Thursday afternoons, the first person almost everyone's going to mention is, Elizabeth runs that group or Ron Ritchie's in that group. Joyce is probably the last person that's going to come up. And I think that is a superpower of a sort because people will speak to Joyce. People will speak around Joyce. There is a power in being invisible and being able to be under the radar. And any good, well-rounded team of investigators needs a person like a Joyce. Everyone wants to talk to Joyce. She brings them baked treats and it opens doors. She is always there to listen, like to Bernard. Like if they had another 2 or 3 years, she probably gets through to Bernard. If she had come along sooner, she maybe gets through to Bernard and maybe actually is able to help him and heal him and bring him back because that's the kind of person that Joyce is. Bernard was just too far gone by the time Joyce arrived at Cooper's Chase. Overlooked almost feels pejorative, but there is something to being the person behind the scenes that is a quality. And I think it is a quality to be appreciated and acknowledged. Any kind of good group of friends, I think, has this person. And when you really step back, that person gets a lot of things done for the good of the group that maybe isn't obvious or maybe isn't something noteworthy, maybe not something you get a gold star for, but the group would be would be worse off if that person wasn't there. Does that make sense?
It does. Joyce has that type of personality where she can be sort of like underestimated, just be considered like this little old lady you mentioned at the beginning, sweet little old lady, kind of feel, although you were mentioning that about Elizabeth, I feel like it's the same type of cliche like phrase we use, right? Sweet little old lady kind of thing. So
I think Joyce is a sweet old little lady. I didn't really mean that. I misspoke with Elizabeth because I think she's a feisty old lady. I think feisty and sweet. I think they're like it's like a snack mix.
I think there's something that Joyce again is hinting at more than that. It's more than just her personally. But I and we're going to get into this into the next question here. So I'm going to just go ahead and read it. It says, society often writes off abilities of the elderly, assuming both body and mind are deteriorating. At the heart of the Thursday Murder Club is a lesson to never underestimate this population. Who misjudges the residents of Cooper Chase the most? What are the consequences of underestimating the four friends? I think that, yes, Joyce as an individual is definitely somebody who's been underestimated her whole life and overlooked. But I think as a population and as this phase of life, they're just considered harmless. You know, and that you can say that in like kind of a lot of ways, right? So harmless meaning like, you know, they're not doing anything. Or yes, they can do things, but like how much impact could they possibly have? Like there's a lot of things that people say about the elderly, and it's not true. I mean, they have this whole friggin' society going on. And these retirement communities,
like the parking rules committee. I mean, they how many cars do they boot in this book?
That was so funny. Yes, that they're very fastidious.
But that's the power, though, that it's recognized, and they will not be quiet.
Yeah, and a lot of people. I mean, I know that I've heard a lot of people, you know, relate to elderly people as children again, and think of them more as like as little kids, and all of that stuff really ignores the wisdom and the life experience that these people have. And I feel like the Bogdan-Stevens scene and the situation with, you know, dementia and memory loss and having sort of like good moments and bad moments, that entire thing works because of their ages and because of how we all look at this population as like, well, they'll just forget about it 5 seconds later. So you can kind of say anything. And I a little bit feel that way about my grandma. Like, I feel like I could say like a lot of stuff, and I don't mean it in an ugly way. Like I could unburden myself if I wanted to. And it would be almost like talking to a priest or something. Like, I feel like she probably isn't going to say anything to anyone. And or it probably like it wouldn't be the same thing I said anyway. So it's like, I don't know. There's something like a vault about them that feels like they're these treasure trove of information and ideas and all this stuff. But also they feel like safe. And I think that can be a really good reason to underestimate them because they feel so safe. And then you're giving the stat about the STDs and like how many of them are like sleeping around. No, but none of us are thinking about them that way. You know, no one's thinking of them as like sexy, wild people out there. I don't think. But if we sat here with, you know, someone in their 70s or 80s and they were like, yeah, we have an entire existence here that you guys can look at us as like harmless, you know, not making a huge impact on the world right now kind of things. But I think they did a good job with someone like Ron showing like, look, he was impactful like his whole life. And now he has to be in this position of feeling like, how can I possibly make an impact in my stage of life and where I'm living and what's going on? Or thinking about Elizabeth and like she has to keep her mind busy and has to be active. And she's doing these cold cases just because like they are still vital, active people who have lots of good ideas and lots of life experience, but they're just overlooked all the time. So going to the question of who misjudges the residents of Cooper Chase the most and what are the consequences, what do you think?
Ian Bentham.
Definitely. That was my answer.
Every aspect of him stems from underestimating and ignoring the resident of Cooper Chase. His entire character arc is based around these old farts, I can do whatever I want.
Yes.
You know, they're not people to him. They're just dollar amounts that hit his bank account when they write their monthly checks or how they're paying for their flats at Cooper's Chase. They're less than invisible. They're just not even worthy of actual consideration. But that's how he kind of seems to deal with everyone, though. It's certainly how he feels about Bogdan. It's certainly how he feels about Tony Curran. But I think he feels that way about the residents of Cooper Chase. So I think it would be impossible for him to ever conceive that one of them killed him, and two, that a group of them figured out who killed him. He would sooner think he would live on Mars before he would acknowledge that was a possibility.
Agree. And that is definitely the consequence of underestimating them, right?
Now shouldn't DCI Hudson, shouldn't he be a person who over or underestimates them more than he does? Again, I think he initially shows reluctance to want to work with them, but in the end, I think he caves into too quickly. Right, as the guy in charge, the official police person in charge of the investigation, I feel like maybe he should have underestimated them a little bit more.
Well, that's where I was like, we have to suspend a little bit of realism, right? Because that's exactly the point. It's just like,
So for you, what's the utility in Joyce being under the radar, because we discussed how Joyce actively didn't really solve any part of the murder, or wasn't particularly important to solving the two core murders. I think her under the radarness, I think her empathy and her love and her very kind-heartedness, her very kind of sweet qualities, but with an edge, I think made her extremely important in resident dealings. Her storyline with Bernard, which I think does resonate through the story, her ability to work with Ron and be kind of Beauty to the Beast kind of with him,
and I think her with Elizabeth,
and being a new Penny for Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's a big part, because that's how Elizabeth works for a lot of the stuff that she does. Not everything. I mean, lots of stuff Elizabeth is perfectly capable of doing all alone. With Joyce, there's sort of that softer little, it's like Joyce is like the lamb's wool around the wolf of Elizabeth. And I feel like when you see them like that, it's like, oh, well, that she provides cover for them in a lot of ways. Because when she's there and she's doing anything, it automatically takes the seriousness and the suspicion and the any type of taking this group, like, I want to say, too seriously. She enables you to be like, oh, it's just this cute little group. You know what I mean? Like, she disarms you. That's her utility of Joyce. She disarms you. She makes you think they're just harmless.
And the baking, obviously
all the cake.
All of the sweet treats.
But that's just another way to disarm you, no? Is to ply you with cake. And so she totally does it.
Cake and tea, you know.
All right, so getting back to the very beginning, what we were saying, did you feel like you could possibly solve this crime given the information we had, right? Let's get into that. So at what point did you have any idea? And now we have multiple murders here, which is kind of unusual in a murder mystery. There's not usually many, but there's many in this one. So did you ever feel like you knew who did it? And did you suspect certain people? And were you right about any of it?
I thought Mackie made a good suspect for the murder for Ventham. Joyce made a good suspect for Ventham. I knew right away it was going to be poisoned via either something on a hand touching him, or
like
a syringe,
contact,
like a
for sure,
like
right?
a con thing, or like a quick stick thing. Because I feel like you just see that in like spy movies. Or
I never thought a needle.
They're like. But I thought the needle, I just missed the needle because it would have had to have been through his coat, because I think he was wearing a coat, and there would have been a needle mark. Like, that would have been really obvious. But I guess they figure out right away that it was, in fact, administered via a needle. But I feel like someone also would see that. So I thought right away it was going to be a contact poison thing. I don't think I picked John out at all. And I didn't pick Bogdan for Tony, because he has a very earnest conversation with Elizabeth where the writing doesn't give us any indication that he was lying.
Yeah.
This is the breadcrumbs. There was nothing to tell us that when you give us, without any kind of context, this conversation, for it to be a lie. Other than then Bogdan's just a liar, right? And that's something that we can only then know afterwards. That's not something we could have detected unless you just assume everyone's always lying, which
maybe as we go along, you and I might get very jaded. It might be like our third or fourth book and we're gonna be like, everyone's a liar.
Here's the thing. If you know me, I am super jaded. I assume people lie every day.
No.
I generally don't like people. I always for what I do for a job, people lie all the time. It's just part of what the world is. So I am super jaded when it comes to people. But when I read a book with like the information I'm being given. And there was nothing prior to that conversation. There was nothing prior to the reveal in the conversation with Stephen, which again, I love that. Actually, I think maybe one of my favorite scenes in the book is the Stephen Bogdan conversation where he just kind of lays it out. Stephen calls him on and he's like, yeah. And then Elizabeth walks in and he goes, shh. And Stephen's like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to say anything. Up until that point, there was no indication that Bogdan had ice in his veins and could pass a polygraph level of lying. So I feel a little jaded about that. I don't think you could honestly, using the facts given in the book, figure out it was Bogdan or John
Or Penny, for that matter, I think.
Or Penny, though that makes a lot more sense, actually, given...
I know that it makes sense, but I don't know if we were given enough info to say that Penny herself...
No, we weren't. Other than she does mention that for all the cases, and this one was a juicy one, Penny herself never suggested it.
Yes.
But had
point.
mentioned it, and it was a case mentioned. I feel like was the backstory on it, but that Penny never ever said it was one that they should look into. Even though clearly Elizabeth was confused by that because there was so much information in the case. But beyond that, that's a long step to cop commits murder in 1970. Mm-hmm. And going back to Bogdan, if you did guess it was Bogdan did the murder, you're guessing that it was the motivation of get Tony out of the way so he can be, secured in the number 2 spot behind Ian.
Mm-hmm. But you're never guessing the other part, right?
No, you never glow friend of my friend of a brother reasoning, revenge reasoning. Which they spent a lot of time talking about the Blackbridge and the murder and the Turkish Johnny and all of that kind of stuff. They spend a lot of time going into what happened 20 years ago, but there's no aspect of that where you could pick out it was a compatriot of Bogdan that he then harbored a secret. I don't even think Bogdan's ever mentioned of having been with that group 20 years ago. So no, I to me anyway, and listeners, if I missed it, please tell me where pick up the crumbs for me, because I was a little frustrated that I couldn't get accurately either of these murderers and then Penny for third based on the facts given. And maybe, I'm rusty. I'm for sure rusty at murder mystery reading. And maybe as we go through this podcast, I will sharpen my wits. But for me, I look back and I've been like, I don't know what I missed that I could have guessed this. How about you?
No, I totally didn't get it. And Bogdan, okay, so you're right that I might have had Bogdan on my board, but not for the reason that he did it. So then in that case, I don't really give myself credit for that. But Bogdan was kind of always on the board. After that, no, Penny was absolutely not. John absolutely was not. No, this absolutely tricked me. I didn't get it. And I don't think I had enough information. I'm not going to be mad at the book because I really enjoyed the characters, but I'm not... I'm not thrilled that you couldn't have figured it out. Now, before we totally wrap this up, I know you wanted to hit Bernard real quick. So I wanted to see, was there anything about Bernard that you felt like that was important about this book, or anything that, because some of the side characters maybe had other messages or other important parts that kind of give this book its heart.
I get Bernard feeling guilty about the ashes and holding on to them. And I get even feeling maybe bad about lying to his kid about the ashes. Homie didn't do anything wrong to feel like he had to stand guard like he did and then end his own life over it. It seems such an overreaction to the situation. I get the relationship and I understand the love there. And I understand, and I very much empathize with the feeling of I couldn't let her go, so I held onto her ashes. It confused me that he got into such a morose place with it because of the lie that he told his daughter, about the ashes I gave you that, you went and spread, or not her real ashes. It just confused me that it would been like, that was your wife. You were with her before the kid was ever around. That takes precedence. It just does. I'm sorry. I felt bad for Bernard that he felt as trapped and bad as he did.
Yeah.
By it. But man, I really don't think he needed to beat himself up so badly about it. Now, maybe there are a bunch of kids out there and being like, you don't know.
He had his reasons. For everything he did, he had his reasons. He did. I just feel it's kind of like John. I feel a little bad that they felt so helpless at the end about it, though. But I think it's realistic.
Because it was their past. Yes, yes, I do think it's realistic. But there is something very sad that at this point in your life, after so many years, that you feel like you still have to pay for sins that really weren't so bad from so many years ago. And for John didn't actually commit any sins. And yet, yes, he was doing it to protect his wife and the memory of her and people's opinions. But
well, he did help bury the body.
The people you care about, though, aren't going to hold it against you.
I think you're right in one way, but in another way, the relationships between adult children and their elderly parents is very different. Like, I feel like you're still looking at it sort of like, you know, like we have kids, like my kids are in their 20s, your son is 17. We're still used to a parent-child relationship with our kids. We're still used to a parent-child relationship with our parents. We're still used to like a grandkid versus grandparent relationship. But this is like when things get messy, where things, the hierarchy of like who, like how you were saying, the parents were together first. And so that's in front of the child and all that. But things start shifting to where the kids start kind of becoming more the parents and the parents kind of start becoming a little bit more like the kids. And you can see that shift happening and the distress, you know, of feeling like I want to do the things I want to do, but now I have to hide it. Now I have to lie. Now I have to do this stuff. And like that lack of control, that lack of independence, you know, of being able to make decisions however you see fit. It definitely goes away as you get older and everybody else seems to think they know best. I actually am a part of a group because I have my grandmother who's 99 and then my dad who's 77, and I help take care of both of them. My dad doesn't need near as much, but he still needs some help, you know, tech stuff or whatever. All of those things definitely changed the dynamic, you know, between me being sort of just the kid. It becomes a strange dynamic because all of those natural positions of like who's in charge and who's the person who's going to make a decision becomes very unclear and murky, and you want to like be thoughtful about what the elderly person or loved one is wanting to do, but at the same time you have to like balance that with like what you know is the best choice for them or whatever. Very, very tricky biz. And that's where I saw Bernard, is like just sort of this absolute distress and just everything just sort of got out of hand for him in his own mind, you know?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think he was trapped in his own mind and, you know, for the part of the story where we knew him. He was being eaten alive by what he had done, but also didn't know how to undo it in a way. So let me ask you then. So if I remember correctly, they dig up the can of his wife's ashes and they siphon off about half of it and mix it with Bernard ashes. So half of Bernard and his wife mixed together go back to the daughter, and the other half go back into the mixture, go back into the coffee urn, and it's reburied under the bench. So they give half and half to the daughter to spread on the UK waves as a at least good faith effort to get her out to sea, to her cosmic, you know, wherever she's meant to be kind of thing. Is that a good resolution without ever telling the daughter what happened? His friends basically kept his lie together.
Right. I'm trying to think of what is owed to the daughter and all that kind of stuff. I say leave his dignity intact. He kept the secret for so long. I think just leave him intact in terms of like not his like image and everything. Does that make sense? Don't tell the secret. Just leave it be.
I agree. I agree too. And I think there is an elegance in, I mean, it required several steps of having to dig up the urn and stuff, but I think there's a certain sweet elegance of mixing them together and then putting them out, you know, to see together, and then the rest of them kind of stay together forever in their little urn under the bench.
Yes.
Number 9 here. Caroline, if you had to solve a murder, this is our final question also. If you had to solve a murder, which 3 people, I'm actually going to say which 2 people, celebrities living or dead, or fictional characters, would you choose to help you solve it? Why only 2? Because I know both you and I are going to pick Jessica Fletcher as one of the people. So beyond Jessica, who are the other 2 people, living, dead, or a celebrity, or a fictional character?
We don't even have to defend why Jessica Fletcher, because she's so friggin' excellent at figuring out her clues.
She's so friggin' excellent at figuring out clues.
She knows all these clues. It's amazing. Okay, well, so I was trying to think about the different characteristics of what people brought to the table. I'm going to throw some weird ones, okay? So my 2 that are outside this are going to be Marie Curie, and that's because she's sort of my Ibrahim. She's sort of my, like, she's going to be like the super analytical one. She's going to be the one who's like going to bring in all the forensic, like, science and stuff. Like, That's her strengths. That's what she's bringing to the table. All analyzing all the numbers, everything that I give her, all the scientific information, any evidence we get, like that's who I want. Okay. And then I think my other person is going to be really funny, but I think it works and I think I'm fine with it. Okay. So Jessica Fletcher, we already said. And then to balance my group out, I think I want somebody with like even more sass than Jessica Fletcher. So I think I'm going to go with Judge Judy. Because she knows the law. She knows the law, right? And she is not afraid to like stand up for herself and speak up for herself and like and get into like anywhere. And I feel like she would just be a really great judge of character. Now, she might be a little redundant with Jessica Fletcher because she has got a lot of that same stuff. But I still think this is my little dream team for right now. Did I shock you with my choices?
No, but Judge Judy Scheinlin was an alum from my law school, so it's essentially like I'm like a descendant of Judge Judy, essentially.
Oh, you are? I didn't realize.
Well, legally, I'm an alum.
You're like her legal baby.
I'm like a legal baby of Judge Scheinlin. Those are good picks. Very girl.
You. I know they shock you.
Very girl boss. Real ass kicking. I like it. My first one is going to be Jack Reacher. Okay. Because there's no clue he ever misses. He is the most observant person I think I've ever come across in any kind of book, really.
More than Jessica Fletcher?
Well, in a modern world, maybe. Okay. I think his history as a investigator in the Army, he was an MP investigator. I think he is well equipped to deal with any kind of rough and tumble that comes, and rough and tumble comes often, but he also is excellent at picking out clues. But Jessica's already on the team, though. I mean, obviously she's the leader of the team, so she's our Elizabeth. So I think Jack Reacher provides great forensic support to Jessica, but also brings all of the muscle you could possibly want.
Okay.
And I was going to go, because of my Tom Clancy, I was going down my Tom Clancy hole. So originally I was going to go with Jack Ryan, who I think is just a great Swiss Army knife of talent. But then I was thinking, actually, I'm going to go with Felicity from the DC TV universe, the Arrowverse. She was kind of the guy in the chair for Green Arrow and the Merry Band of Vigilantes. But she was like the hacker of the group. Wicked smart. And knew how to get into every kind of computer system or anything out there tech-wise or information-wise. She knew what it meant and she knew how to obtain it.
Okay.
My last question is, this is not a reading book question, but this is my fun question. We're going to say this takes the place of the question of cake.
Okay.
Are you an Elizabeth, a Joyce, an Ibrahim, or a Ron? This is like Sex and the City, but Murder Club.
Gotcha. Okay,
I'm more of a Samantha.
I think that probably at the end of the day, I'm more of an Elizabeth in terms of like wanting to just do what I know how to do and not really let other people sort of stand in my way. I don't think I fit in with Ibrahim. I don't think I match up with Ron. And I don't think, at least in my life.
I think you have strong Joyce qualities.
No, well, hold on. The only reason why I say I'm not sure about Joyce is because I don't get that, like, you fly under the radar comment about myself very often. Like, people don't tend to not notice me. So for me, I don't think I could be, like, flying under the radar as easily.
I agree with that. You seldom
like
go
you're, like,
unnoticed,
what
but I think you have an empathy that. Well, no, because I thought about this. I thought about this question insofar as who I thought you were more than I did about myself.
Oh my! Okay,
which is why I'm asking. Because I was curious how you would see yourself, because I think you're actually a lot of Joyce's empathy with the edge. I think that is a large part of your personality, and I think the edge is why one of the reasons you are often mostly never overlooked. But you do have a let's just get it done Elizabethness about you for sure.
She has
do have
like
a leadership quality.
Yes. Yeah, and like a just a bluntness that I think that
she definitely has Lithuanian blood in her. Is that what you're saying?
Well, when I'm not trying to have my hospitable side show, I'm definitely have a like we've got to get this done. You know what I think part of it is? I was actually very much thinking about this last night because I was thinking about the dynamics of families, and I think because my family is fairly new to America. We're only a couple generations here from Lithuania. And for me, what I realized is that my personality is very much based on this idea that like we are an immigrant family and we had to work like very, very, very hard to be where we are today. And so I feel like there's this like teamwork, but also like no nonsenseness that is even within the dynamic of our families. And I mean that about my immediate family. I mean that about my extended family. Every single one of us, if you asked us to, like if you called, we would like pull ourselves up and like be out wherever you need us to be. Like we'd get our boots on, we get our whatever you need, and we would be there. And so we're there for each other. But that also creates like a not natural family togetherness. It's more like we're a team working on like building a company or something. Like we're building something as a group, and it feels that way.
Or a village trying to survive.
Yes, but it doesn't feel like the same thing as I think what I imagine a regular nuclear family feels like, which is like more like, oh, we're like nurturing each other and I'm doing this. It's that, but there's this sense of like everybody plays a role. And everybody has to play their role. And I think that's the Elizabeth side, why there's a long way around to me being all the way to Elizabeth, where I'm saying like there's this practicality, this like we have to get X amount done today in order for the company, if you will, the bigger company to like move forward. So that's how I feel.
I think I'm an Elizabeth with a lot of Ibrahim traits.
Definitely.
I think I have a planning sensibility.
Ron in there. I think we both have a little bit of Ron in us, in that we both can be charming if we need to be. We can turn on.
But so
charm.
could Elizabeth, though. See, here's the difference.
True.
I think Elizabeth and Ron are actually like two sides of the same coin. I think Ron is charm, but with like a blunt axe. And I think Elizabeth is charm with like a stiletto between your rib cage.
Ooh, okay.
And I think you and I are much more charm with a stiletto between the rib cage than a blunt hammer to your face like Ron.
That's true.
I very much about the facts and figures and planning of Ibrahim for sure. I don't like people enough remotely to be a Joyce. But like on the Ron thing, like the charm part definitely resonates with me, but the kind of flying off the handle, like emotional outburst part, very not my style. Okay. I get much more, if I'm upset the way Ron explodes, I get much more quiet than I get loud.
Oh, okay. I think I go both ways.
Then you get a stiletto between your ribcage.
I think I go both ways. I think I can be loud, but I think I can seethe with the best of them.
So Caroline and listeners, I'm curious about if you've read this book. I'm curious about if you've read the next ones. If this is the first time you're reading The Thursday Murder Club because you were excited about the TV movie, or the Netflix movie rather. Are you going to continue on? So The Man Who Died Twice comes out in 2021. The Bullet That Missed comes out in 2022. The Last Devil to Die comes out in 2023. And The Impossible Fortune, the fifth book in the Thursday Murder Club series, comes out September 25th, 2025. Are you going to keep on with the series? Reading these books? Is there enough here for you? I want to see how these characters unfurl.
I would. I could see it maybe next summer when it's like back to just sort of summertime easy reads that are like just sort of easygoing and mostly character driven. Then I could definitely see myself reading more. How about yourself?
I think I definitely will. I really like the setting of Cooper's Chase. I really like these four characters. I'd like to learn more about them and see. Like I said, I'm a sucker for a series. So if I like the character, I need the characters to take me in because I want to read a series because I like world building. That's the shorthand. I like world building above all else. Cooper's Chase is a great world to play in, so I want to see more of that. So I think I'm definitely going to stay with these books, even though they don't have movies attached to them yet. Listeners, for our October book and movie, or TV show rather in this case, we're going to be covering Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough, I believe came out in 2017, and the accompanying 6-episode Netflix series from 2021, which is still available on Netflix as of recording anyway. So that is going to be our October series. Again, it's going to be Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough, and it was a 6-episode Netflix series from 2021.
And I know absolutely nothing about this except for that people are very excited about it, and that
I had never heard of it until 7 hours ago when you told me about it.
Well, apparently the plot twists are excellent, and they're really going to like have our jaws hanging on the ground. So I'm excited about that. But part 2 of this, it's join the club, see the show, right? So join the club, you guys. This was part 1, book club of the Thursday Murder Club. But our second episode to this will be talking about the show. So there is this show on Netflix, and it's a roughly about 90 minutes, you'd say?
I think it was just over 90 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So about 90 minutes, we're going to watch that. And then we're going to come back and talk to you guys and compare it a little bit, contrast, let you guys know what we think, let you know what we think about things like casting and how did the place of Cooper Chase translate onto the screen, and what did they do about cutting out some characters and changing some people, and what do we think about all that? This is Caroline.
And this is Mike. Thank you for listening to the Book Club Meets Movie Night. If you wouldn't mind heading over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, this is going to be a brand new RSS feed for you to subscribe to. So we would love for you to rate, review, and subscribe. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. If you do, we're going to read it on the air in our future episodes. And let us know also just what you think of the podcast idea. Is this something you want us to keep going on with? If you wanted to change if you could change anything, what would you change? What do you want to hear more of? What do you want to hear less of? Does this format work for you? Let us know what you think. We love to hear from you, and leave us a nice 5-star review. We're going to read it on the air.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.